Presenting the Insta360 Sphere. So basically what this thing does is it takes a Mavic Air 2 or Air 2S and turns it into a 360 camera. Battery basically goes in right here. There's your power button, a record button. Pretty straightforward. This is a latch that opens up. We'll just line that up right there and then just clamp it down. And now we basically have a flying 360 camera. Now, in case you're not familiar with 360 cameras, these two lenses are ultra wide field of view lenses, and it stitches it together and you have basically a global 360 image, so you can look in any direction. Now, they actually did try this before with the Mavic 2, but the problem is that it blocked the GPS signal, so you couldn't have that GPS lock stabilization. And also, if you happen to lose connection with your drone, it doesn't know where it is. But this time it maintains that GPS signals, gives us access to all our sensors and all that good stuff. So let's get it up in the air and film Dylan while he tells us about today's sponsor, Storyblocks.
The great thing with Storyblocks is that with over 1 million royalty-free stock assets, you can find basically anything. But wait, what if you're using this camera to film a 360 video for VR? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask, because Storyblocks has a whole selection of 360 videos that'll have your content bursting like popcorn. With one affordable all-access subscription plan, Storyblocks gives you access to unlimited royalty-free downloads. That's unlimited images, music, videos, graphic templates, and dragons. With Storyblocks, the power to create the narrative is yours. So click the link below and have your content flying off into the sunset today.
So first impressions with the Sphere, I think it's very unique and it definitely introduces some interesting possibilities. So like this first shot here, I wasn't thinking at all about making sure I get Dylan the shot. I was just like, don't crash trying to go through that little gazebo. And then right when I get past it, it's cool to be able to just widen out the shot and then tilt the camera down. And it's cool because I can process this same shot a dozen different ways. I can look forward, I can look behind me. So this shot here, I thought it would be interesting to process it to track the lighthouse and do a little 360 spin out of it. But if that's too much, I could process it again, but this time just going straight. That also looks good. The other idea I had was to have the camera going sideways and getting a profile shot of the dragon there. Like this shot here, the very first time I processed it, it was just looking down at Dylan and this dragon just didn't really fit on top of it. But since I shot 360, I was able to tilt up and get that dragon in just at the right time. Now, one of the things is that you can kind of get these FPV-like shots. Now, I think FPV is more about the aircraft itself, and the Mavic Air 2 just is not an FPV drone. But what we can do is try to emulate certain shots that you would get, like a building dive. And instead of an actual FPV drone where you're like, whoa, and just like free fall and spiraling down and then you stop yourself right before you crash, what we're gonna do is actually just like descend very cautiously and safely, and then we edit it and speed ramp it to make it look like a dive. Here is a demonstration of how you should not take off, because this is extremely dangerous. Don't do this. Oh my gosh, I'm just showing this to you as an example of what not to do, okay? You will chop your head off, you will die. You can actually get stitches from this. And here we go. If you do and you cut yourself, don't blame me. Actually, I forgot if I already started recording or not. You can actually look at it from the back, and if it's blinking red, you know it's recording. We're just gonna do a nice slow descend, and then we're gonna speed ramp this. If you're going to speed ramp it, it's actually better to not go too fast because you want more frames for it to motion blend. So I'm just flying really, really slow. I will say though, this is much less stressful than flying actual FPV. Little tip, you should never see yellow right there. If you do, that might mean that you're not perfectly lined up down here. And if you do, you should be able to just close it and you shouldn't see any yellow. So far, so good. I'm gonna try to get a little more mileage on this while Carrie rides this Super 73. You ready for this?
Dun, 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 dun. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
The song?
Yeah.
Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Now I do kind of want to try this tiny planet shot where you get the camera over and then it looks like the planet becomes tiny. Some people love it, some people hate it. I think it's a fun little effect.
It's almost like cartoony.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny. But if I fly this and then you could ride right underneath it, it might look like you're riding through a tiny planet. By the way, don't fly drones over people. That is illegal unless you are a participant.
You should have prop guards on it, but I'm a willing participant, so.
Clearly, Carrie trusts me far too much.
I don't trust you. I trust the drone because it has sensors.
By the way, the app is just like what you get on the One X2 or the One RS, so I can connect to it, but the range is not that great, so it's not like you can monitor your shot the whole flight, but it's good for checking your settings, making sure you don't have any smudges on the lenses and your settings are all good. You can hit record or stop it from the app right now, and you can actually check your footage even though it's still in the air. Uh-oh, we got some visitors here. Okay, as I was saying about the app here, it's pretty much the same as what you would expect out of Insta360's other cameras. I personally really like using this viewfinder because I get to kind of just feel like I'm a camera operator, but sometimes I get these really long takes. So what I like to do is hit the speed and I go to 16x and I scroll through the entire clip. So instead of having to go over 5 minutes of footage, I can go through it all in like 15 seconds. Everything is very fast, but now we could go ahead and remove that 16x speed ramp. Now we have general viewfinder framing for 5 minutes of footage. That's how I like to just blast through it real fast. Now I will say the app has gotten pretty good at smart tracking, so I'll just select carry here and it pretty much looks like it's doing it real time. So this is one of those instances where I just flew and I had carry just follow behind. So she is for the most part in one lens. Don't worry about stitch lines. She can get as close to the drone as she feels comfortable. The same effects that you would get out of the 1X2 or 1RS, you can still have it here. Horizon flip is a really interesting one. Now in terms of technical specs, I'll go ahead and throw them up there and it looks pretty much the same, if not the same as what you would get out of like the Insta360 1X2 or the 1RS. So I'm actually downloading the full 360 file onto my phone before I send it back out, just in case. Try to keep up with carry, I had to hit some high speed, so of course I had to be in sport mode, which means no sensors. Oh, Peta, how you doing, buddy?
She was the co-pilot today.
By the way, I do feel like I have to do this little PSA now. If you go down there in the comments and you find like the spam account that's like, congratulations, and it has the same thumbnail as my profile, and they're like, you won something, what's at me? Like that's a scam, okay? Always check the account, make sure it's real. Anyways, Peter says it's nap time, we gotta go. Now, as cool as it is to turn your drone into a flying 360 camera, there are a few things you do need to keep in mind. Most obvious is that this bottom lens here does protrude past the bottom, so you do have to really be careful to protect this thing. So this landing pad is key so that you can land this thing and not just grind the lens into the pavement. Now they also include these little lens protectors here. It just kind of attaches like this, and it is an adhesive, so it just sticks on. To be real with you guys, I'm probably just gonna take this, get a few shots with it, and then rip it off, because protective filters are often great, but you do see more glare and other artifacts and things that I don't want to see. But as you're getting comfortable with it, definitely this is something that can save you a lot of headache and your wallet a lot of damage. The other thing I am noticing is that these lenses are spaced further apart, which is a good and bad thing. Obviously, it's great because it clears the drone and essentially makes the drone invisible as far as the shot is concerned, at least. But the downside is the further apart the lenses are, the more parallax you're gonna get. That means if you have a subject going between these two lenses, then you might have some stitch issues. You might get distorted, you might see some blur. 10 meters is the recommended distance for having clean stitch lines. So 10 meters, that's a good amount of distance. So I like to get closer, and the way I get around that is by trying to keep the subject as much as possible in one lens. Now, one of the things I learned from flying FPV is that I'm much more aware of the pitch and the positioning of the drone itself. So if I start speeding up, I'm gonna pitch the drone this way and I can put a subject right here. So following is amazing. I can get right up against the lens as long as I'm going at a decent speed, or if you're flying above something or backwards. But for the most part, you want to avoid putting important detailed subjects in those stitch lines. But if it's something simple like a pillar where there's not too much detail, then it's a lot harder to see those stitch lines, so you can actually get away with flying pretty close to it. I also noticed that if you're flying nice and steady, the stitch lines are harder to see. The software does a pretty good job cleaning that up. But once you start doing all this crazy shit, then the stitch lines are going everywhere. Also, definitely keep in mind that this is not a replacement for this camera. You might as well just try to get the shots with this camera when you can. This is 5.7K, but keep in mind that 5.7K is the entire 360 image, and then depending on the type of shots you're gonna extract, you're gonna end up with less. So record, try to get the shots with this camera, and all the shots you missed, or you wanna get creative or do something unique, then these cameras are here alongside. shot. Well, I keep looking at this camera. I need to like remember to look at this camera. I've got the close-up camera down here. So hey, like over here. I was also concerned about the weight it adds to the aircraft itself, but as far as I can tell so far, it flies just fine. I barely know it's on there. We even try to find some dust devils to try to fly it through just to see if it'll whip it out of the sky. But honestly, the Mavic Air 2 and the Air 2S, like the aircraft itself is really solid and you barely notice the difference with it on. The battery life is going to be shorter. They claim 20% shorter battery life. Yep, did one flight with these lens guards. They are coming off. It was actually decently clear, but you could see the edges of it in the stitch line. So you have to tell the app that you're using these guards and it makes it even harder for it to stitch. So I'm going to take these off and just be extra careful. By the way, the first time I ever flew a 360 camera was when Beta FPV made one where you could convert your 1R into that. It was super cool. It was low profile, but the downside was that it's an FPV drone. Those are much easier to crash or skid against the ground, and I did bust a couple of lenses. But good news is with all these sensors working, you're much less likely to just skid this against the ground. Ooh, look at that wind. Also, you want to make sure that these lenses are nice and clean before you take off.
You have food all up in
Oh man. Oh, I had Thai food earlier, didn't I? So the thing about professional drones like DJI Inspire is that you have a pilot that's just focused on doing the flight and making sure you don't crash. And then you have a second operator focusing on the camera. If you're really fancy, you have a third person for the focus and zoom and all that stuff. But that's kind of what it takes to do a perfectly coordinated flight and camera shot. But what I think is really cool about this Sphere is that it's kind of like the budget action camera version of that. So first you focus on getting your flight in, and then afterwards you get to go in and frame up your shot. So you're kind of also like the second operator, but you get to do the operation later. I think that's about it. We are gonna go eat and get some food and maybe a beer.
You can have a beer since you're not flying anymore.
After you drink a beer, you can't fly for how long was it? Was it 12 hours? Bottle to throttle, 8 hours, something like that.
I think it's 8.
Unless you get plastered.
You might need more than 8 hours.